Welcome back. Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. We've been doing this show since 2005, so I really appreciate you joining us throughout the years. There's particularly this show, this weekend show. And as you know, we've been following elections since then, and we are now following very closely this particular electoral process because there's a lot of things that are very different that we need to understand. And of course, it's the largest election, literally the largest election that is taking place in Mexico. That's why I appreciate very much our following guest. He's been joining us throughout the years, ever since he was a commissioner at the Federal Electoral Institute. He was there for 12 years and between 2008 to 2020. So he knows Mexico's electoral process very well, Dr. Benito Nacif. Benito, thank you so much for joining us. And just put into context what what is at stake here? Why are these considered to be the largest and probably the most complex elections in Mexico's history? Welcome to the show.
Hi, Ana Maria. Thank you for having me on. Well, these are the most complex elections that we ever had in Mexico for a very simple reason. The number of elective offices that are going to be renewed from the presidency of the Republic to a large number of municipal presidencies and municipal councilors, and passing through senator. The whole Senate is going to be renewed, the Chamber of Deputies at the federal level, and a number of governorships. Never in Mexican history have so many offices have been renewed in a single day, which is going to be the 2nd of June, 2024.
Now, there's also there's also an interesting issue here that this is also during this elections is the first time that the time between the elections takes place and the president is sworn in. It's much shorter. It used to be almost 6 months between the time the president was elected and the new president was sworn in. Now the elections is June 2nd, and the new president is supposed to be sworn in October 1st. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, this is because of constitutional reform that was passed in 2014. But this is the first time that these new dispositions are going to be applied.
What else is new in terms of legislation?
Congress was supposed to begin its period of session in August, but the latest constitutional reform moved it to the 1st of September, which is the traditional date in which the new Congress is installed. So that's not going to change, because the change was revoked very recently.
Do you know why? Why did they do that?
I don't know. I mean, there were other solutions, but changing the constitution is a national sport, I think. They could have amended the organic law of Congress, but they decided to reform the constitution instead.
Because the strange thing is, you're going to have in a new Congress that is going to be potentially going to be, they're going to be legislating under the president, under an old president, really, I mean, basically, or at least it would have worked out, I guess, if they started in August. You could have August, September, and they could start the legislative work. But I guess they just they didn't want that extra time, huh? It's very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean,
So,
mhm.
so I'm sorry. Let me ask you this. Help us understand at what point we are in the electoral process, because Mexico has a very strange. Some of the laws, I think, for some of our listeners, are going to say this is very strange. How come we're at a stage where there are clearly identified, for example, presidential candidates for the three main groups? You know, the Morena and allies, the opposition, and Movimiento Ciudadano, Citizens Movement. They all have their candidates, but technically these candidates can't do any campaigning. So can you just tell us where were we, what just happened a week ago, and when do they start officially doing campaign? Just walk us through this.
Well, it's all very confusing because I mean, in actuality, we had candidates since the beginning of September. But according to the law, the electoral process, with several phases, begins the first week of September. Officially, there is a period of preparation which goes from the beginning of the electoral process to the beginning of the primary season. Officially, the primary season began on November the 20th and concluded a week ago, on the 18th of January. It lasted about 50 days altogether. It's the period in which political parties are supposed to have their internal process of candidate selection.
Primaries, I guess, and a lot of people could identify that as
exactly
okay, their internal primaries, but they don't vote. People don't vote for their candidates.
Yeah,
like
they're not really primaries for that reason.
Yeah,
there's no participation of party affiliates or the public in general. We already knew that Claudia Sheinbaum was going to be the presidential candidate of Morena. And we also knew that Xochitl Gálvez was going to be the candidate of the parties that form the opposition front. I mean, that's and the PRI and the PRD. So we already knew that. So the primary season was had a different purpose. Yeah,
right. The campaign.
Exactly. It's an electoral campaign by another name.
So in maybe in 6 years, when they have the elections again, maybe there will be more of a competition in the parties, which would maybe allow for primaries similar to what they have in other countries, where there's more input.
Well, we had a little competition this year, last year, but I mean, it's a competition without rules. It's not transparent. According to the rules set up by Morena, the governing party, a set of polls were going to decide who won that internal competition. We never knew exactly
what happened,
how those polls were conducted, but Claudia Sheinbaum was the winner anyway. And we had something similar in the case of Xochitl Gálvez. Yeah. All of that happened months before the primary season.
Mm,
the official primary system.
right.
Yeah.
So where are we now then?
Well,
A
we
week
are in
ago, there was, yeah, a week ago, there was the primaries and that were supposed to lead up, whatever you want to call them, primary selection of candidates that leads up to, the identifying who is going to be at least your presidential candidates. And I believe most candidates for Senate and
Mhm,
Congress, right?
mhm.
And so now where are we? And for
Well,
governor?
I mean, according to the law, to the electoral law, it's a strange period within the electoral process in
Mhm,
which the primary season is finished, it's over, but the campaigns proper have not begun. They are
mhm,
they will begin in on the 1st of March. So we have all
mhm,
these, which I mean, it's a month and a half,
mhm,
all February, part of January, in which it's a period in which political parties are supposed to uh, define who won the primary season,
mhm,
and had their nominating conferences and all of that. And then
mhm,
electoral authorities have the also the opportunity to revise the legality of what political parties did internally to select their candidates, and then uh, with certainty register candidates, um,
mhm,
uh, and they will be um, legally enabled to conduct uh, their campaigns during the
mhm,
campaign season, which will go from the 1st of March to the
mhm,
29th of May, I think.
mhm,
It's a period of 60 days. Sorry, 90 days for the presidential campaigns. And
mhm,
once that period concludes, then you have 3 days of in which the campaigns are completely suspended, and
mhm.
um, uh, the Mexican electorate will be given the opportunity to ponder carefully, rationally, and
Right.
passionately who is going to vote for.
Well,
And then
that's
you
what
have
the law,
election day.
that's, yeah, then you have elections. I mean, those 3 days before the elections, it is crazy. Because when you think
Absolutely.
about it, I mean,
But
it's
it's a
the
French
oddest
thing.
thing. Huh?
Yeah, it's something that we took from the French, and
Yeah.
they also have it. I don't know if in France it lasts 3 days, but they have
Hmm.
several days of reflection.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Oh, and of course, there's no polls can be published, and
yeah.
everybody's supposed to be at home pondering their vote, I guess. But let me ask you this. This is the way you describe the process is very interesting. Now, the National Electoral Institute, as the elections authority, is supposed to be supervising this process and supervising and making sure that the candidates and their campaigns and their teams aren't violating the electoral legislation. I mean, what could go wrong during this period? I mean, starting with, which appears that a lot of money from the government was used, for example, or it appeared to be used during the primaries or the selection of the candidates. The problem right now is how do you supervise the money being used by the candidates?
Well, it's very difficult. Um, During the period in which candidates were actually selected,
Mm-hmm,
as I said before, months before the primary season, the legal primary season,
mm-hmm,
um, a lot of spending took place without the authority noticing it or taking account of it.
mm-hmm,
Even though a late intervention by the electoral court
mm-hmm,
ordered um, uh, the National Elections Institute to intervene and take account of all the expenditures that were being made by the by the people competing for these inter-party positions that we all knew were the presidential candidacies.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, this week, no, next week, the federal court was going to pronounce over a huge fine that the National Elections Institute imposed to Morena,
Right.
because some of the expenditures that it detected were not reported or were not properly accounted for.
And it would be basically money that they would take away from the money that Morena receives from the National Electoral, or it's allocated through the National Electoral Institute. Is that correct?
Well, most of it came from private sources that are not identified. I mean, this is one of the most serious faults or violations to electoral laws. Let me give you an example. They identified very many billboards with the promoting Marcelo Ebrard or Claudia Sheinbaum, and with the excuse that they were promoting the book.
A book or a magazine, an interview in a magazine. Yeah, so that was very popular.
The electoral authority went to the people who rent the billboards, and the printing houses, and they discovered that they didn't pay for it. I mean, for these billboards, but they never found out who paid for that publicity.
Well, and I know the president of Morena, Mario Delgado, is fighting the fine. It's like 60 million pesos or some kind of crazy amount, right?
Well, I think the amount is it's tiny comparing with the real expenditures that took place.
Let me ask you one last question in terms of, and then hopefully it'll come soon to just kind of continue walking us through this process. But let me just ask you one more question. Joining us today is Benito Nacif. He's a former commissioner at the National Electoral Institute. He was there from 2008 to 2012. He knows Mexico's electoral process very well. Let me just ask you one last question. How much money can the candidates spend legally? And can they receive, like it happens in other countries, money from the private sector, private donors?
Well, INE has the mandate to calculate the amount of money according to parameters established in the law, electoral law, the amount of money that candidates can spend during the primary season, and what they can spend during the campaign proper season. And during the primary season, I don't remember exactly the amount in Mexican pesos, but it is about 80 million Mexican pesos.
Okay.
Something like $4 million.
Okay.
And during the campaign, the campaign season, I mean those 90 days, that amount goes up to more than $400 million, million pesos. Sorry,
million pesos.
About $20 million.
Mm-hmm.
And
But where does that money come from?
most of it comes from the public funding that political parties receive from INE, from the National Elections Institute. Most of it, and because the Mexicans the Mexican system of campaign financing sets very many restrictions to private sources. Overall limits, individual limits, and other documentation that is required,
right?
The legality that makes donating to campaigns very, very difficult and risky.
Right. Well, let's do this. I ran out of time. Hopefully you'll come back soon, because there's so many questions I need to ask you. What happens if, the National Electoral Institute or the Electoral Tribunal identify that there was, millions and millions and millions of unaccounted money coming into the campaign, or money coming from illegal sources, such as organized crime or foreign governments? I mean, at one point, it could be potentially, you'd annul the elections. I don't know if that even could happen in Mexico, but promise me you'll come back and we'll walk through these scenarios in a future show. So thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Benito Nacif.
Thank you. I'll be delighted.
Commissioner. You need to educate us, because it is somewhat of a mystery, and there's just so much going on. And it is, like you said, very, very confusing. Dr. Benito Nacif, he is a former commissioner at the National Electoral Institute. He was there for 12 years. And it's always great to have him on the show. Thank you so much, Benito.
Thank you.
We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you so much for joining us here on Living in Mexico.